So I'd like to talk today about existentialism and the arts. There's been a lot of cross-pollination between existentialism as a philosophical idea and the art world. So one of the things that we've seen already quite a bit is many writers who express existential ideas primarily through novels, poetry, short stories, parables, and plays. So we've seen that with Dostoevsky, also with Rilke and Kafka, Sartre and Camus. And some of these also wrote like pretty straightforward philosophical treatises, but some express themselves largely through these kind of stories or these other media. And I think that's worth asking is like, what is it about existentialism that might lend itself to this kind of expression rather than a sort of straightforward philosophical argument? We've also seen cases where there are particular existentialists who have been influenced by figures in the art world. So Rodin, the sculptor Rodin, not the Japanese flying monster, was an influence on Rilke. And Cézanne, we saw, influenced Merleau-Ponty, and in many cases these are people who are interested in phenomenology and seeing like the particular way that visual artists try to capture the nature of conscious experience in painting, especially for Merleau-Ponty, that he was looking to Cézanne to try to get a handle on that. It's also true that many existentialists value artistic creation, the creative life, as being a way to express one's authenticity. So, for example, Nietzsche, Buber, Camus, Merleau-Ponty, and others have argued that this is a fulfilling and useful way to live one's life, struggling to express oneself through artistic creation. In fact, Camus said that if life were clear, we wouldn't need art. So grappling with the uncertainty and the meaninglessness of existence can lead people to artistic creation. Now, we've seen also not just artists influencing existentialists, but existentialists influencing artists. So, for example, Giacometti, who does these like the kind of elongated, simple figures, especially like solitary figures, was influenced by existentialist ideas, as was Dubuffet, who's known for art brut, so the Dubuffet's ideas were to try to capture a sort of more authentic visual expression, like what we see in the artwork of children and the mentally ill and other untrained artists, as being sort of like a more sincere expression than the formalism of the trained artist. Francis Bacon, in his painting, tried to capture not just the form, not just a representation of a person, but the kind of like emotional content behind it. And Walls was someone who he knew Sartre and Beauvoir from personal experience, and in his, most of the other visual artists that we've seen are primarily like somewhat representationalist, and they started off with maybe like fairly straightforward representationalist art and becoming more expressive or more introspective as they went along. And Walls's artwork tends toward the more abstract, and what it seems like he's trying to capture is sort of like the spontaneity and the immediacy of the creative act. So a lot like what we see in American abstract expressionism, like Jackson Pollock. That's what Walls was trying to do. Maybe an even clearer parallel between existentialism and art is in theater. So like the theater of the absurd tries to kind of capture the absurdity of existence. So one of the playwrights that's most associated with that would be Samuel Beckett and like Waiting for Godot, but also Ionesco. May know Tom Stoppard, who wrote Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. So these these plays try to show that the breakdown of communication by, including a lot of sort of like nonsense exchanges and maybe juxtaposition of very, very strange events, something totally mundane on the one hand, something very tragic or shocking, etc., just to evoke that sense of the absurd. And the theater of the absurd tends to reject a kind of classical dramatic structure in favor of kind of like a circularity, like, all these weird things happen and it starts where it began. I think too you see another influence of existentialism in filmmaking. So internationally, filmmakers like Ingmar Bergman, like Tarkovsky and Kurosawa, have expressed existentialist ideas in their films. The French New Wave, particularly Truffaut and Godard, have been influenced by existentialist ideas. We see Italian filmmakers like Antonioni, De Sica, who did Bicycle Thieves, and Fellini, embracing existentialism in at least some of their films, particularly mid-century films, and like a whole range of American filmmakers up to the contemporary. So Stanley Kubrick, Orson Welles, Terrence Malick, Woody Allen, and the Coen brothers have all expressed existentialist themes in their films. On the handout or the notes for this existentialism in the arts, I have a whole list of a bunch of recommendations of films that you might be interested in. I'm really interested in film, and there are a ton of great films that express existentialist themes. Also, I included a slideshow, a PowerPoint slideshow of some of the visual artists who either influenced existentialists or were influenced by existentialism. Thank you.